G'day guys, SemiX2 here. Today is a different type of video. We are going over Major League Rugby and the growth of the competition and basically what it is. Should you watch it? Should you get involved? Should you get behind it? Alright, now this is the new type of video, so I'd like to hear your support, your feedback, your comments, anything down below in the comments. But let's jump right into it. Alright, so Major League Rugby currently has a few teams. We have Seattle, LA, San Diego, Utah, Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, Chicago, Carolina, DC, New England, and Miami. You can see there's another team here, and that isn't a Mexican expansion team that is looking likely to join next year. Unfortunately, this season is the first season since the beginning, basically, without a Canadian team, which is really unfortunate, but hopefully in the near future we see another team added back. Alright, here's the timeline of Major League Rugby teams. As you can see, we have a few teams on here that aren't there anymore. But that's what happens. It's a new competition for a pretty small sport in North America. So, as Major League Rugby keeps saying, growing pains. The competition is going to chop and change quite a lot until it finds its feet fully. And here we go. So we got Austin, who used to exist, and Colorado, who used to exist. Austin folded. Colorado left to join a different competition. We still have Houston, San Diego, Seattle, Utah, and NOLA. And as you can see, these guys have been there since the start of the competition. We lost New York at the end of last season, same with Toronto. But we've also had New England, Old Glory join in. We used to have a team in Atlanta, but they got bought by new owners and they relocated to LA after this other LA team folded. We have Dallas, Chicago, and within the most recent season, we've had Miami and Anthem Rugby Club join. Alright, so one of the most important factors I feel like a lot of people like to look at is attendance. Now, as you can see here are the top attendances for Major League Rugby. We have two over 10,000, and that is including the grand final from last year, which was 10,100 and 11,423 for the first round of the 2023 season. Now, it goes down a little bit, but then you see there's a lot at 4,500, and that is due to the capacity of a lot of these stadiums. So there's a few teams such as Seattle, Utah, New England, that have 5,000 capacity stadiums, and they regularly sell out and get just below 5,000 people there. Now, I personally think that's a great problem to have. If you have to look at expanding your stadium, that means you are doing something right, and you don't want to have a stadium that is too big where you only get 5,000 in there and then that looks like a bad product to sell. You have a small capacity stadium, and once you build that fan base, you look to expand, and that's what these teams are doing. Seattle and New England are looking at expanding, which is great to see. Alright, so a comparison is here. So we have the 11,400 from last season and the 10,000 from last season in Major League Rugby. Now here's a comparison to Premiership Rugby in the UK, England specifically. Their average lies around 13,000 per game, and these two 10,000 attendances from Major League Rugby is not that far off that average for Premiership. As you can see, the 11,000 crowd that we got in Major League Rugby actually beats the average for the URC crowd, and it is about 3,500 or 3,000 off the top 14 average. So that's showing that even after a couple of years, Major League Rugby is getting crowds that aren't that far off the big competitions. Is it as consistent? No. As we saw in the slide before, there's a lot of crowds around that 4,000 mark, which is still great to see. That's definitely, even that 4,000 mark is higher than, some of the Italian teams in the URC. The Rebels in Australia are going through a bit of a rough patch right now. They're getting about 4,000 people there. So that's showing that this new competition in America, where rugby hasn't really been established properly, is already getting crowds that are comparable to the big rugby competitions around the world. Now here's another thing here. The Major League Rugby final attendances with a trend line. So in 2018, they had just below 3,000. 2019, it improved up to 6,000 in a sellout. Then there was no season in 2020. And this is where I think it's really interesting. Even with no season in 2020 after COVID, a lot of competitions around the world really struggled with gaining their fans and getting everything back on track. And Major League Rugby, as a competition that only had 2 full seasons before COVID, managed to bounce back the year later and break a record, a crowd record of 7,389. And then 2022, you can see, you're like, what the hell, this is weird, right? This is an outlier. Just below 2,000 here. I'll jump back to that in a second. And then even though after that low 2,000 crowd, Major League Rugby bounced back and broke a record for their finals and got over 10,100 people to the 2023 final. What I find really interesting about this final figure from last year is that this was held in a neutral venue in Chicago. None of the teams in the final were the Chicago team. You had San Diego, which is the west coast of USA, and then you had New England, which is the northeast, and Chicago's in the middle of the country. So you had over 10,000 people show up to Chicago to watch two teams that aren't from that city play, and they still beat crowds from the years before. Now, the 2022 final, the reason it's so low is that there was a bit of controversy that year. Austin and LA, who were both owned by the same owner, they made the finals. However, they got suspended from the competition as there was salary cap issues and it was just kind of shady, which is not what you want to have in the competition. So Major League Rugby suspended them, kicked them out of the comp, and that meant that teams that weren't originally qualified for the playoffs were brought up due to two teams being kicked out. And then there was also a shambles around where the host venue was for the final. And that only left about a week and a half, 2 weeks for the venue to be announced and tickets to go on sale. And it was just a shambles. It was bad. And it's not what you want to see in a growing league. However, I'm really impressed with how well Major League Rugby bounced back the year later. Now, here's some photos here. So you can see, thanks for helping us breaking a Major League Rugby record, 11,400. Then we've got crowds here from a final. This is New England's ground. They get heaps of people in all the time. Here's Chicago. Chicago get a good, decent crowd. And then Houston this year have been selling out regular games. So it's looking promising for Major League Rugby. Even though it's a small sport in the States and North America, they are growing, and that's what you want to see, especially with 2031, the Rugby World Cup being hosted in USA. Looking at broadcasting, the Major League Rugby has a few different things going on. So over here, the bottom left, each team has their own local broadcasters. What this means is, say Houston and Utah are playing, Houston have Space City Home Network, which means Space City Home Network will only be a channel available in the Houston area. So you can watch Houston play on this local network, or if you're not in that local network, week 1, Houston versus Utah was broadcasted on Fox Sports 2. You can see here they are partnered, Major League Rugby is partnered with Fox Sports, which is a huge broadcasting company over in USA. You see Fox Sports 2, they have games on Fox Sports 1, which is great to see. You can see most of these are each week. If not, there'll be 1 week off, but then you have some weeks where there's multiple games on. And then you also go over here to the Rugby Network, which is Major League Rugby's own streaming service. It's free to sign up for, and over 100,000 people have signed up and used the platform, which means that there's an interest there, which is great to see for a young competition. So I think Major League Rugby's on the up. Moving on to notable signings. So Major League Rugby has a relatively small salary cap compared to the rest of the rugby competitions. However, it is also a place that a lot of people are going over to start their rugby career if you aren't USA based. I know in Australia, lots of people play club rugby, and a few good players have been signed to Major League Rugby. They'll play there for a season or two. They might stay there, or they might come back to Australia or head over to Europe or Japan and continue their career. Notable signings, Ma Nonu, who used to play for the All Blacks legend, still plays in Major League Rugby for San Diego. Here he is up on the left. Matt Giddo and Adam Ashley Cooper played for the original LA team, and Matt Giddo is actually signed for San Diego at the moment, same team as Ma Nonu. Chris Robshaw, who used to play for England, played for San Diego for 1 season, and we also have Thomas Cubelli, who is the Argentinian player. He is playing for the new team, Miami. Here's another interesting fact. World Rugby has recently started pumping some money into Major League Rugby to help USA develop players for the 2031 and 2027 World Cup. Here's an article I took a screenshot of. The league has added a 12th team for the 2024 season. The purpose of this team is for short-term qualification for the 2027 World Cup and the long-term improvement of the Eagles as a competitive entity heading towards the Rugby World Cup in 2031 in the USA. 2031 is the USA Rugby World Cup. Carolina Anthem, this team up in the corner, basically their mission, they've been funded by World Rugby, is to get players that are eligible for USA. They have more USA eligible players compared to other teams to play in a higher level competition as compared to, say, college rugby or, local D1A. I think that's what the top comp is called in North America. Get these players playing at a higher level for the long-term goal of getting the USA Rugby Eagles back on track and eligible for the Rugby World Cups. I really think Major League Rugby is on the up, guys. USA sports market is so crowded. I don't think goal for Major League Rugby is to compete with, say, American football, NFL, or NBA, or NHL, or even Major League Soccer to that extent. Major League Rugby should aim to become a sports competition that is big, but it doesn't need to be one of the big ones. America has about 350 million people living there. When you compare that to England with about 50 million people, I think it is. Australia with 25 million. New Zealand only has 5 million. These are all countries that play rugby. America has such a large population. All you need is a small sliver of that market to be involved with rugby. You're going to see it take off. You're seeing it now. You see a few American football players, they didn't make the NFL, they come play rugby, and then they go pretty well. I just think Major League Rugby needs to continue on the path it's on and get more investment. You see World Rugby throwing money into it. I don't think World Rugby is going to throw money into a competition they don't believe will continue on. And then I think what you really need to look at is what the 2019 World Cup in Japan has done for the popularity of the sport there. Now, Major League Rugby is trying to grow to help the Eagles compete in the 2027 and, more importantly, the 2031 World Cup in America. But the 2019 World Cup in Japan boosted the popularity of the sport in Japan. And that's going to happen here, I think. Once the World Cup occurs in America, I think people are going to look for local rugby teams. They're going to find their local Major League Rugby team. And if it's not already grown to a great extent, I think that's really going to kickstart that. Anyway, guys, I would really like to hear your thoughts. Anything you want to see from Major League Rugby? What do you think it's doing well? What do you think it's going to be in 10 years? Do you think it will help the Eagles compete? Will it become one of the biggest rugby leagues in the world? Will it become one of the biggest competitions in the USA? Let me know your thoughts down below, guys, and thanks for watching.